No one could calm the furious Arab millionaire woman until the single-father janitor spoke fluent Arabic and everything changed. Before we dive in, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night, you're exactly where you need to be. The marble floors of the Grand Plaza Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, but nothing could reflect the storm brewing at the reception desk. Amara al-Rashid, draped in designer silk worth more than most people's yearly salary, slammed her diamond-encrusted phone against the mahogany counter with such force that several guests in the opulent lobby jumped at the sound. "This is absolutely unacceptable." Her voice echoed through the vast space, bouncing off imported Italian marble walls and causing conversations to die mid-sentence. Women in Chanel suits paused their afternoon tea, while businessmen in $1,000 suits turned to stare at the spectacle unfolding before them. "I specifically requested the penthouse suite 3 months ago, confirmed it twice with your incompetent management, and you dare offer me some ordinary room like I'm a common tourist?" The trembling desk clerk, barely 22 with nervous sweat beading on his forehead, fumbled through reservation papers with shaking hands. His name tag read, Michael, and this was clearly his worst nightmare coming true. "Ms. Al-Rashid, I sincerely apologize for this unprecedented situation, but there seems to have been a catastrophic system error that affected multiple reservations." "Error?" Amara's dark eyes blazed with the fury of someone unaccustomed to hearing the word no. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped the counter's edge until her knuckles turned white. "Do you have any comprehension of who I am? My family owns oil fields that stretch across 3 countries, refineries that could buy this entire hotel chain 10 times over, and you think you can placate me with excuses about system errors?" Behind her, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, smartphones discreetly recording what would undoubtedly become viral social media content within hours. Hotel security personnel exchanged worried glances from their positions near the elevator banks, unsure whether to intervene or maintain their distance from someone whose net worth exceeded their annual salaries by several $1,000,000. In the corner of this chaos, almost invisible among the grandeur and drama, James Martinez quietly pushed his cleaning cart across the pristine floors. His worn gray uniform bore the hotel's elegant logo, now faded from countless industrial washes and years of honest labor. The fabric was clean but showed the telltale signs of a working man's life: small stains that wouldn't come out, careful patches where tears had been mended, sleeves slightly frayed from constant use. Beside him, creating a stark contrast to the adult chaos erupting nearby, his 6-year-old daughter Emma sat cross-legged on the polished floor. She was carefully organizing her colored pencils in an old shoebox, arranging them by color intensity with the meticulous precision that only children possess. Her dark hair was pulled back in neat pigtails secured with simple rubber bands, and her clothes were clean but obviously second-hand, a faded Disney princess t-shirt and jeans with patches on the knees. "Daddy, why is that pretty lady so angry?" Emma whispered, her innocent brown eyes wide with genuine concern as she looked up from her art supplies. "She sounds like the mean queen from my storybook." James paused his methodical mopping, the familiar rhythm of his work interrupted as he watched the scene unfold with practiced invisibility. At 34, he'd learned to navigate these spaces like a ghost, present but unseen, necessary but unnoticed. Rich people's problems weren't his concern. He had bills to pay, a daughter to raise alone, and 3 jobs to maintain just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. The situation escalated dramatically as Amara switched to rapid Arabic, her voice rising with each syllable in a torrent of words that most of the American crowd couldn't understand, but everyone could feel the intensity of. Hotel security approached with the cautious steps of men who understood that one wrong move could end their careers, unsure how to handle a guest whose family fortune could not only have them fired, but could potentially bankrupt the entire establishment. "This is intolerable," Amara continued in English, her accent thick with emotion. "I fly halfway around the world for crucial business meetings, and this is the treatment I receive? Where is your manager? Where is someone with actual authority?" That's when something completely unexpected happened, something that would change the trajectory of 3 lives forever. James straightened his shoulders, set down his well-worn mop with deliberate care, and walked directly toward the eye of the storm. "Ma'am," James said quietly in perfect, fluent Arabic, his voice carrying the gentle but unmistakable authority of someone who truly understood both the language and the cultural weight behind her words. "Peace be upon you, and may Allah grant you patience in this moment of frustration. Perhaps there's a way to solve this situation with the dignity that someone of your obvious refinement deserves. The entire lobby fell into complete stunned silence. Conversation stopped mid-word, coffee cups paused halfway to lips, and even the soft background music seemed to fade into nothingness. Amara's mouth dropped open, her fierce tirade stopping as abruptly as if someone had pressed a pause button on her fury. The desk clerk Michael blinked repeatedly as if trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Even little Emma looked up from her careful color organization, sensing instinctively that something profoundly important was happening. Amara studied James with intense curiosity, her rage momentarily replaced by complete bewilderment. This man, this hotel janitor in a faded uniform, had just addressed her in her native language with perfect pronunciation, proper formal structure, and cultural respect that even some of her father's business associates failed to demonstrate. You speak Arabic? She asked in English, her voice now barely above a whisper, all the fire drained out of it. Yes, I do, James replied, switching back to English but maintaining the respectful, measured tone that seemed to cast a calming spell over the entire situation. I lived in Jordan for 3 years, stationed in Amman and later in Zarqa. I learned not just the language but something of the culture, the values, the importance of hospitality and respect. He paused, glancing down at Emma, who was watching this exchange with the fascination of a child witnessing adult magic. I understand your frustration completely. Sometimes when we're far from home, surrounded by unfamiliar customs and faces, small problems can feel overwhelmingly large. It's natural to want the comfort and respect we're accustomed to. Emma tugged insistently at her father's uniform sleeve, her small face scrunched up in confusion and wonder. Daddy, you never told me you could speak that beautiful musical language. It sounds like singing. James smiled down at his daughter with the kind of warmth that only a devoted parent could muster, then looked back at Amara with eyes that held genuine understanding rather than judgment. My daughter Emma here teaches me something new every day about patience, about seeing the good in every situation. She has a gift for making everything seem a little easier, a little brighter. For the first time since storming into the hotel 20 minutes earlier, Amara's rigid posture began to soften. The furious tension in her shoulders eased as she found herself genuinely looking at this man and his child, not as invisible service staff, but as human beings who had somehow managed to diffuse her volcanic anger with nothing but kindness and respect. Almost without realizing what she was doing, Amara knelt down to Emma's level, her expensive silk dress pooling around her on the marble floor in a gesture that would have horrified her usual social circle. What are you drawing there, little one? Emma held up her latest masterpiece with pride, a picture of 3 stick figures standing under a rainbow, drawn with the uninhibited joy that only children possess. It's you, me, and Daddy being friends. See? I made your dress purple because you look exactly like a princess from my favorite storybook, the kind one who helps people instead of being mean to them. Something profound cracked in Amara's carefully constructed emotional armor. She hadn't been called a princess with such genuine, unguarded sweetness since she was Emma's age, back before wealth and family expectations had built impenetrable walls around her heart, before every relationship became calculated, every interaction measured for its strategic value. It's absolutely beautiful, Amara whispered, accepting the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. She looked up at James, really seeing him for the first time, not as invisible help or hotel staff, but as a man who had shown her more genuine kindness in 5 minutes than she'd received from anyone in months. I'm sorry, she said quietly, her voice now stripped of all arrogance and pretense. I haven't been myself lately. Actually, I'm not sure I've been myself for a very long time. The crowd that had gathered to witness the spectacle began to disperse, sensing that the drama was over, but something much more significant was just beginning. 3 hours later, Amara found herself in the most unlikely place imaginable, the hotel's small, cramped employee break room, sharing coffee from a temperamental vending machine that required exactly the right combination of button pressing and machine shaking to produce anything remotely drinkable. This was something she had never done in her 32 years of rigidly privileged existence, where even her morning coffee was prepared by a personal assistant using beans that cost more per pound than most people spent on groceries in a month. The break room was a stark contrast to the hotel's public opulence, fluorescent lighting that flickered occasionally, mismatched chairs that had seen better decades, and a bulletin board covered in employee schedules and notices about benefits packages. Yet somehow in this humble space, Amara felt more comfortable than she had in any of the five-star restaurants or exclusive clubs she usually frequented. Emma sat cross-legged between them on the worn linoleum floor, chattering enthusiastically about her favorite cartoons, while working her way through a new coloring book that Amara had impulsively bought from the hotel gift shop. The little girl's animated descriptions of cartoon characters and their adventures filled the small room with a kind of joy that Amara had forgotten existed. "So you were actually stationed in Jordan for military service?" Amara asked, stirring sugar into her surprisingly decent vending machine coffee, genuinely curious about another person's life story for perhaps the first time in years. James nodded, cradling his steaming cup in work-roughened hands. "Army translator and cultural liaison, 2016 to 2019. 3 of the most challenging but meaningful years of my life." His expression grew softer, more distant. "That's where I met my wife, Sarah. She was a nurse with Doctors Without Borders, working in refugee camps and mobile medical units." His voice grew noticeably quieter, carrying a weight that Amara immediately recognized as profound loss. "She passed away 2 years ago. Aggressive breast cancer. Diagnosed, fought like hell for 8 months, and then..." He shrugged with the practiced acceptance of someone who had learned to carry grief as a permanent companion. Amara felt her heart clench with an unexpected empathy. In her world of endless charity galas and shallow social interactions, real loss, genuine, devastating loss, seemed almost foreign. People in her circle dealt with inconveniences, not tragedies. Divorce settlements, not death certificates. "Daddy was very, very sad for a long time," Emma added matter-of-factly, not looking up from her careful coloring but clearly listening to every word. "He used to cry at night when he thought I was sleeping, but then he told me that Mommy became the brightest star in the sky, and now she watches over us every single night to make sure we're safe and happy. Emma is the only reason I kept going some days." James smiled, reaching over to ruffle his daughter's hair with infinite tenderness. "When everything else felt impossible, when getting out of bed seemed like too much effort, she would climb up next to me and start planning our day like nothing had changed. Kids have this incredible resilience, this ability to find joy even in the darkest moments." Amara watched their interaction with growing fascination and something that might have been envy. In her family, displays of genuine affection were rare and calculated. Her own father viewed her primarily as a business asset, her worth measured exclusively in strategic marriages, corporate alliances, and her ability to expand the family's already vast fortune. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at her the way James looked at Emma, with unconditional love and pride. "What about you?" James asked, settling back in his chair with genuine interest. "What brings you all the way to Chicago? Besides terrorizing innocent hotel clerks," he added with a gentle smile that completely removed any sting from his words. Amara actually laughed, a real, spontaneous laugh that surprised her with its genuineness. When was the last time she had laughed at something that wasn't calculated social politeness? "Business meetings, as always. Endless, soul-crushing business meetings. My father expects me to finalize a merger with the American oil company that I..." She paused, surprised by her own sudden honesty with these virtual strangers, "that I'm really not sure I want to be part of." Emma looked up from her coloring with the direct, unfiltered curiosity that only children possess. "If you don't want to do something, why do you have to do it? That doesn't make any sense." The simple, innocent question hit Amara like a lightning bolt of clarity. When had she stopped asking herself that fundamental question? When had her life become a series of obligations she never questioned, responsibilities she never chose? Over the next 3 days, something extraordinary and completely unexpected began to unfold. Amara found herself returning to the hotel each evening, not to retreat to her finally arranged penthouse suite with its panoramic city views and luxury amenities, but to seek out the employee areas where James worked his late shift, among the quiet corridors and service elevators. She would arrive around 8 p.m., when the lobby's daytime chaos had settled into evening quiet, and make her way to whatever section of the hotel James was assigned to clean. Sometimes she found him in the laundry facilities, methodically folding towels with the precision of someone who took pride in even the most mundane tasks. Other evenings he was restocking supplies in guest rooms, moving through his work with efficient grace. Emma was always there, a constant bright presence in the midst of adult complexities. The little girl had claimed Amara as her newest best friend, showing her drawings, teaching her the words to songs from animated movies, and asking endless questions about life in princess countries. as she had dubbed the Middle East. "You don't have to keep coming back here," James said one particularly quiet evening as they sat in the small employee courtyard behind the hotel, a hidden oasis that most guests never knew existed. The space was simple but peaceful. A few benches, some carefully tended flower boxes, and string lights that cast a warm glow over the brick walls. "You must have better things to do with your time than watch me mop floors and listen to Emma's endless chatter about cartoons." "I know I don't have to," Amara replied softly, watching Emma sleep peacefully on the bench between them, covered in James's work jacket. "But for the first time in years, possibly ever, I feel real, like I'm actually living instead of just performing the role of living." Through their conversations, she had learned the full scope of James's daily struggle: hotel janitor from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., weekend landscaping crew from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, and online Arabic tutoring sessions squeezed in whenever Emma was napping or occupied. Despite working nearly 70 hours a week, he never complained, never seemed bitter about circumstances that would have broken lesser people. His small apartment was a 20-minute bus ride from the hotel. Emma's school was decent but not great, in a neighborhood that was safe during the day but required careful attention after dark. He had no family nearby. His parents had died in a car accident when he was in Jordan, and Sarah had been an only child with elderly parents who lived in assisted living across the country. "How do you do it?" Amara asked one night, the question that had been building in her heart for days finally finding its voice. "How do you stay so positive, so genuinely kind when life has been so incredibly unfair to you?" Most people would be angry, bitter, full of resentment. James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Emma's sleeping face, watching the gentle rise and fall of her small chest. "Sarah used to say something that stuck with me, especially during the hardest days after she died. She said that bitterness is just pain with nowhere to go, like poison you drink hoping someone else will feel sick." He paused, carefully tucking his jacket more securely around Emma's shoulders. "So I made a choice to put my pain somewhere useful, into loving Emma better than I even knew was possible, into working harder so she could have opportunities I never had, into being grateful for what we have instead of angry about what we lost." Amara felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't even realized existed. Her own pain, years of feeling unloved except for her financial value, used as a pawn in business deals, trapped by family expectations that grew heavier each year, had indeed turned to bitterness. She had built emotional walls so high that even she couldn't see over them anymore. "I've never told anyone this," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet courtyard, "but I feel like I'm drowning in my own life. Every decision is made for me by my father and his advisors. Every relationship is strategic, calculated for maximum business benefit. I can't remember the last time someone wanted to spend time with me just because they enjoyed my company." James turned to look at her directly, his expression serious and kind. "Well, Emma and I want to spend time with you just because we like who you are when you're being yourself. Does that count?" Tears that Amara hadn't shed in years began to fall, each drop carrying years of accumulated loneliness and frustration. In this quiet courtyard with a widowed father and his sleeping child, she felt more genuinely valuable, more truly seen and appreciated than all her family's oil money had ever made her feel. But she had no idea that 3 floors above them, someone was watching through telephoto lenses, taking photographs that would change everything and threaten to destroy this fragile new happiness before it could fully bloom. The next morning arrived with the subtlety of a natural disaster. Amara's phone began exploding with calls at 6:47 a.m., the shrill ringtone cutting through her sleep like a knife through silk. Her father's voice thundered through the speaker even before she could manage a groggy hello, his rage traveling across 8 time zones with perfect, terrifying clarity. "What is the meaning of these photographs?" Khalil al-Rashid's fury filled the opulent penthouse suite, seeming to vibrate off the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Chicago's awakening skyline. "My daughter, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, the future leader of al-Rashid Industries, fraternizing with hotel staff like some common tourist with no sense of propriety or family honor." Amara's blood ran cold as she opened the email attachments with trembling fingers. The photos were professionally shot, clearly taken with expensive equipment from a distance. They showed her laughing with James in the employee break room, sitting close together in the courtyard with Emma asleep between them, accepting the little girl's drawing with obvious emotion. walking through hotel corridors deep in conversation with a man in a janitor's uniform. Innocent moments, genuine human connections, twisted into something scandalous by the photographer's invasive lens, and the implications that would inevitably follow. In her father's world, these images represented the ultimate betrayal, his carefully groomed heir lowering herself to associate with people so far beneath their social station. "Father, it's not what it looks like," Amara began, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. What it looked like was a lonely woman finding friendship and possibly something deeper with a good man and his daughter. What it looked like was human connection, transcending artificial barriers of wealth and social status. "It looks like my daughter has completely forgotten her place, her duty, her responsibility to this family." His voice cracked like thunder, each word delivered with the force of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You were sent to Chicago to finalize the merger with Morrison Oil, to secure our expansion into American markets, not to play house with the help. Do you have any idea what these photographs could do to our reputation, our business relationships?" The line went dead with the finality of a door slamming shut. Amara stared at her phone, hands shaking uncontrollably as the full implications began to sink in. In just 4 days, James and Emma had shown her what life could feel like when filled with genuine connection, rather than calculated obligation. They had given her a glimpse of who she might be if she were free to choose her own path. And now that fragile possibility was being crushed under the weight of family expectations and social conventions. She found James in the hotel's industrial laundry room, methodically folding towels with the same careful attention he brought to everything else in his life. The air was warm and humid, filled with the clean scent of detergent and the rhythmic sounds of commercial washing machines. Emma sat nearby at a small table someone had set up for her, practicing writing her name in a composition notebook with a concentrated focus that children bring to important tasks. "I have to leave," Amara said without preamble, her voice hollow and defeated. "Today. This morning." James looked up immediately, his hand stilling on the towel he'd been folding, instantly recognizing the distress in her voice and posture. "What happened?" With hands that still trembled slightly, she showed him the photographs on her phone, watching his face change as he realized the full implications of what they represented. She saw understanding dawn in his eyes, not just the immediate problem of invasive photography, but the larger reality of the vast social chasm that separated their worlds. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I never meant for this to affect you or Emma. I never thought—" "Miss Amara, you're crying." Emma immediately abandoned her writing practice, jumping up to wrap her small arms around Amara's waist in a fierce hug. "Did someone hurt your feelings? Do you need me to draw you another happy picture?" "Something like that, sweetheart," Amara managed, kneeling down to embrace the little girl who had unknowingly changed her entire perspective on life. In Emma's simple, unconditional affection, she saw everything she was about to lose. James stood slowly, processing everything he'd seen and heard, understanding the impossible position she was in. "Your father doesn't approve of this, of us." It wasn't a question. James had clearly understood the situation immediately, recognizing the fundamental incompatibility between Amara's privileged world and their modest reality. Amara nodded miserably, unable to trust her voice. "Then you have a choice to make," James said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "The same choice Emma asked you about the other day. If you don't want to do something, why do you have to do it?" But the answer seemed impossible, overwhelming in its complexity and consequences. Her family's expectations, their vast business empire built over 3 generations, the life she'd always known, the security that came with never having to worry about money or survival. How could she walk away from all of that? And for what? A relationship that had barely begun with a man she'd known for less than a week? Yet as she looked at James and Emma, something her father had said echoed in her mind with different meaning than he'd intended. He'd accused her of forgetting her place. What if she hadn't forgotten her place? What if, for the first time in her life, she'd finally found it? The question was whether she had the courage to choose it. That evening, alone in her penthouse suite overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline, Amara made a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. She called her father, and this time, she was ready for war. "I'm not coming home tomorrow," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, each word carefully chosen and deliberately spoken. The silence stretched for 30 seconds that felt like hours. When Khalil finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier explosive rage. "I beg your pardon?" I said. "I'm not coming home, not tomorrow, not next week, maybe not ever." She walked to the massive windows, looking down at the city lights where James was probably reading bedtime stories to Emma right now, their modest life continuing in blissful ignorance of the corporate drama playing out 40 floors above them. "Amara, you are clearly overwrought. These photographs, this ridiculous infatuation with inappropriate people, has clouded your judgment beyond all recognition." "No, Father." Her voice grew stronger with each word, as if speaking the truth was giving her power she'd never known she possessed. "For the first time in my 32 years of existence, my judgment is completely clear. I've spent my entire life being exactly who you wanted me to be, building your empire, impressing your business partners, being the perfect daughter and heir. But I've never, not once, been happy. Happiness is a luxury we cannot afford in our position, Amara. We have responsibilities. That's where you're wrong." The words came out with surprising force. Happiness isn't a luxury. It's the entire point of living. What good is all our money, all our power, if it only makes us miserable? She could hear her father's breathing, rapid and sharp with barely contained fury. "If you do this, if you throw away everything our family has built for some American nobody with a child, you will be completely cut off. No money, no family connections, no support of any kind. Do you understand what that means? You've never worked a day in your life, never faced real hardship. You have no idea how to survive in the real world." The threat should have terrified her. A week ago, it would have sent her running back to Dubai with her tail between her legs, begging forgiveness and accepting whatever marriage arrangement he had planned next. But now, thinking of Emma's innocent wisdom and James's quiet strength in the face of real adversity, she felt something she'd never experienced before: complete freedom. "I understand perfectly," she said with calm finality, "and I accept those terms." "Amara, don't be foolish." She hung up the phone and immediately turned it off, cutting the final cord that connected her to her old life. 2 hours later, there was a soft, hesitant knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw James standing in the hallway, still wearing his work uniform, holding Emma's hand. The little girl was in her favorite pajamas, pink with cartoon unicorns, clutching the very first drawing she'd made that day they met. "Emma insisted we bring you this," James said quietly when Amara opened the door. "She was worried that you might be sad tonight and might need a reminder that you have friends who care about you." Amara knelt down as Emma approached with the serious expression of a child on an important mission. "I wanted you to keep my very first picture," the little girl said solemnly, pressing the slightly crumpled drawing into Amara's hands. "So you remember that even when people are mean and say hurtful things, there are still friends who love you just because you're you." As Amara accepted the drawing for the second time, she realized with crystal clarity that Emma was absolutely right. She had found something infinitely more valuable than all her father's oil money could ever buy. A family that chose to love her simply because she existed, not because of what she could provide or how she could be useful. But tomorrow would bring the hardest part, figuring out how to build an entirely new life from scratch. And she still had no idea if James would want to be part of that uncertain future. Dawn broke over Chicago with the harsh reality of Amara's new circumstances. She sat on her penthouse balcony, watching the city wake up below, while clutching Emma's drawing and a cup of coffee that had grown cold hours ago. The weight of her decision pressed down like a physical force. She had just walked away from a billion-dollar inheritance and a life of absolute security. Her phone, turned back on for the first time since hanging up on her father, immediately buzzed with dozens of missed calls and messages. Her assistant Layla had sent increasingly frantic texts. "Your father is freezing all accounts. The board is meeting an emergency session. Please call immediately." When Amara tried to use her credit card for breakfast, it was declined. Her father had moved faster than she'd anticipated. Within 12 hours, she had gone from unlimited wealth to having exactly $247 in cash and no access to any of her previous resources. "Miss Amara," Emma's voice rang through the hotel lobby like a bell of pure joy. The little girl ran toward her, pigtails bouncing, carrying a paper bag that smelled deliciously of homemade breakfast. "Daddy made extra pancakes because he said you might be hungry." James approached more cautiously, his work shift just ending, still processing everything that had happened the night before. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," he admitted quietly. "I'm not going anywhere," Amara said, and for the first time in hours she smiled genuinely, "though I might need to learn how to make my own coffee." James studied her face carefully. "Your father cut you off completely, didn't he?" Amara nodded, surprised that she felt relief rather than panic. Everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, trust funds. I'm officially broke by any standard I've ever known. She laughed, a sound that held both fear and exhilaration. I have less money right now than most teenagers. Daddy, Emma tugged on James's uniform. Does this mean Miss Amara can come live with us? She could sleep in my room, and I could teach her how to make peanut butter sandwiches. The innocent suggestion hung in the air between the adults, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully examine. James cleared his throat. Actually, I might have an idea. The hotel is looking for someone to work the morning reception desk. It's not glamorous, but it pays enough to get started. Amara stared at him. You want me to get a job? An actual job? Unless you have a better plan for eating next week, James said with gentle humor. Besides, you speak multiple languages and clearly know how to handle difficult customers. You might be surprisingly good at it. 2 hours later, Amara found herself sitting across from Margaret Chen, the hotel's human resources manager, wearing the same designer dress she'd worn to threaten lawsuits just days earlier, now applying for an entry-level position. Your resume is interesting, Margaret said diplomatically. No formal work experience, but extensive international travel and language skills. Can you start tomorrow? 3 weeks into her new life, Amara had learned more about survival than her privileged upbringing had ever taught her. Her hands, once soft from expensive treatments, now bore small cuts from handling keys and cleaning supplies. Her designer clothes had been replaced with practical outfits from discount stores, purchased with her first paycheck. She'd moved into a tiny studio apartment 6 blocks from the hotel, 400 square feet that cost more per month than she used to spend on single meals. But every morning she woke up with something she'd never experienced before, genuine purpose. Good morning, Mr. Peterson, she greeted the elderly businessman who had become a regular. Your usual room on the 14th floor is ready, and I took the liberty of ensuring you have extra pillows as requested. Her natural grace and genuine care for guests had quickly made her the hotel's most requested desk clerk. She handled complaints with empathy born from her own recent experience with disappointment, and her multilingual skills had already resolved several international guest issues that had stumped other staff. But it was her evenings that brought real joy. James had started timing his breaks to coincide with her lunch hours, and Emma had claimed the hotel lobby as her second home. The little girl would arrive after school, spreading homework across a corner table while waiting for her father's shift to end. Miss Amara, look. Emma proudly displayed a spelling test marked with a gold star. I got all the words right, even the hard ones. That's incredible, sweetheart. Amara knelt down to Emma's level, examining the paper with the same attention she once gave to million-dollar contracts. Your handwriting is getting so beautiful, too. James appeared from the elevator bank, his evening cleaning routine finished. Over the past week, something had shifted between them, an easy comfort that came from sharing daily struggles and small victories. How was your day? He asked, the simple question carrying more genuine interest than any of her father's business associates had ever shown. Challenging, Amara admitted. A guest threw coffee at me because his room wasn't ready exactly at check-in time. 6 months ago, I would have had him banned from every hotel chain in the world. Today, I got him extra towels and an apology fruit basket. James smiled. And how did that feel? Better than revenge, actually. He ended up apologizing and leaving a nice review specifically mentioning my patience. Emma looked up from coloring a new picture. Daddy says when people are mean, it's usually because they're sad inside. Maybe that man just needed someone to be nice to him. The wisdom of a 6-year-old continued to astound Amara. In her old world, difficult people were obstacles to be crushed or avoided. Here, they were human beings having bad days, deserving of compassion rather than retaliation. Speaking of being nice, James said, his voice carrying an unusual nervousness. There's something I wanted to ask you. Saturday afternoon found them in Lincoln Park, Emma running between playground equipment while James and Amara sat on a bench watching her boundless energy with shared amusement. It was their first official non-work time together, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. She's incredible, Amara said, watching Emma help a younger child reach the monkey bars. I've never seen someone so naturally kind. She gets that from her mother, James replied softly. Sarah had this gift for seeing the best in everyone, even in the worst circumstances. Emma inherited that, along with Sarah's stubborn optimism. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before James continued. What I wanted to ask you yesterday. There's something happening next week that I think you should know about. Amara turned to face him fully. noting the careful way he was choosing his words. Emma's school is having their annual father-daughter dance next Friday. It's always been hard for me. Sarah used to help her pick out dresses, do her hair, all the things I'm not very good at. He paused, watching his daughter's joyful play. This year, Emma asked if you could help her get ready. She wants you to be there. The request hit Amara unexpectedly deep. She wants me there? She's been talking about it for days, about how you could help her with her hair like a real princess and maybe teach her to walk in fancy shoes. James smiled, but Amara could see the vulnerability in his eyes. I know it's a lot to ask. We haven't defined what this is between us. Before Amara could respond, Emma came running over, grass stains on her knees, and pure excitement radiating from every inch of her small frame. Miss Amara, Daddy told you about the dance, didn't he? Will you help me be beautiful? I want to look like you, all elegant and graceful. Amara's heart melted completely. I would be honored to help you get ready, sweetheart. We'll make sure you're the most beautiful girl at the entire dance. Emma threw her arms around Amara's neck with uninhibited joy. This is going to be the best dance ever. I can't wait to show everyone my two favorite people. Over Emma's head, Amara met James's eyes. In that moment, she realized they were no longer just friends helping each other through difficult circumstances. Somehow, without planning or announcing it, they had become something that felt remarkably like a family. That evening, as they walked back toward the hotel, Emma skipping ahead of them, James took Amara's hand for the first time. His palm was rough from years of physical labor, completely different from the soft hands of men in her previous world, but it felt like coming home. Amara, he said quietly, I need you to know something. Us, it's not charity or gratitude. You're not some lost princess I'm rescuing, and I'm not your project. I'm falling in love with who you really are. She stopped walking, their joined hands bringing him to a halt beside her. James, I need you to understand something too. 3 months ago, I thought love was something that happened in business contracts. I thought security came from bank accounts and family connections. But you and Emma have taught me that real security comes from being genuinely known and chosen by people who see all of you and decide to stay anyway. Emma had noticed they'd stopped and came running back. Are you guys being mushy? She asked with 6-year-old directness. Because it's okay if you are. I think it's nice when people love each other. They looked down at this wise little girl who had somehow become the heart of everything good in both their lives. Yeah, sweetheart, James said, his voice thick with emotion. We're being a little mushy. Good, Emma declared with satisfaction. Now can we get ice cream? The morning of the father-daughter dance arrived with unexpected drama. Amara was helping Emma with her hair in James's small apartment when her phone rang with an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Amara, her father's voice was cold and controlled. I'm calling to give you one final opportunity to return home with your dignity intact. Emma looked up from the mirror where Amara was carefully braiding tiny flowers into her hair. Who is that, Miss Amara? They sound angry. Amara muted the phone quickly. Just someone from my old life, sweetheart. Keep looking at your beautiful hair in the mirror. She unmuted the call and stepped into the hallway. Father, I thought I made my position clear. Your position, Khalil said with barely contained fury, is about to become impossible. I've had investigators looking into your new associates. Did you know your precious janitor has significant debts? His wife's medical bills nearly bankrupted him. One word from me to his creditors, and he'll lose everything. Amara's blood ran cold. You wouldn't. I would do anything to protect this family's reputation and bring my daughter home where she belongs. You have 24 hours to end this embarrassing situation and return to Dubai, or Mr. Martinez will discover just how difficult life can become for people who interfere with Al-Rashid family business. The line went dead. Amara stared at her phone, her hands shaking with a combination of fury and fear. Her father had found her weakness, not threats against her, but against the people she loved. Miss Amara, Emma's voice called from the bathroom. I think I'm ready to see my whole dress. With tremendous effort, Amara composed herself and returned to the apartment. Emma stood in front of the full-length mirror wearing a pale pink dress that James had saved for weeks to buy. Her hair was perfect, tiny braids woven with small white flowers, and her face glowed with pure happiness. You look absolutely magnificent, Amara said truthfully, kneeling down to adjust Emma's necklace, a simple heart pendant that had belonged to Sarah. Your daddy is going to be so proud. James emerged from his bedroom wearing his best suit, which Amara now knew was his only suit, purchased for Sarah's funeral, and worn only on the most important occasions. Despite its age, he looked handsome and dignified. Every inch the devoted father who worked 3 jobs to give his daughter magical moments like this. "My 2 beautiful girls," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at them together. The word girls, as if she belonged here, as if she were truly part of this family, should have filled Amara with joy. Instead, it broke her heart, because she now knew this perfect moment was about to be destroyed. At the school gymnasium, transformed with twinkling lights and careful decorations into something magical, Amara watched James and Emma dance to slow music, while other fathers and daughters swayed around them. Emma's face radiated pure happiness as her father twirled her carefully, both of them laughing at some private joke. This was what love looked like, Amara realized. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but a man working himself to exhaustion, so his little girl could have one perfect evening. A child who saw her father as the greatest hero in the world, regardless of his job title or bank account. When the song ended, Emma ran over to where Amara sat at a small table. "Did you see how good we danced? Daddy says I'm getting really good at not stepping on his feet. You were both perfect," Amara said, memorizing every detail of Emma's joyful expression. But across the room she noticed a man in an expensive suit who didn't belong, clearly not a father, watching their table with professional interest. Her father had moved even faster than his deadline. The choice was no longer theoretical. She could stay and watch James lose everything he'd worked for, or she could disappear from their lives and preserve their happiness. For the first time since leaving her old life, Amara knew exactly what she had to do. At 2 a.m., Amara sat at James's kitchen table writing a letter she never thought she'd have to compose. Through the thin walls she could hear Emma talking in her sleep, probably still dreaming about the magical evening they'd shared. "Amara?" James appeared in the doorway, wearing old pajama pants and a faded t-shirt, his hair messed from sleep. "I thought I heard someone moving around. Everything okay?" She looked up at him, this man who had shown her what genuine love looked like, who had given her the greatest gift of her life by letting her be part of his and Emma's world, and felt her heart break completely. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." James sat down across from her, immediately alert to the gravity in her voice. "My father called today. He's threatening to destroy you financially if I don't return to Dubai immediately. He can do it, James. He has the connections and the ruthlessness to make your life impossible." Her voice remained steady despite the tears beginning to fall. "I won't let him hurt you or Emma because of me." James was quiet for a long moment, processing what she'd told him. "So you're leaving?" "I have to. If I stay, he'll make sure you lose your jobs, your apartment, everything you've worked for. Emma would suffer, and I can't live with that." "And if you go back?" Amara's voice broke slightly. "If I go back, he'll probably arrange a marriage within months, to someone who will strengthen business relationships and expand the family empire. I'll never see you or Emma again, but you'll both be safe." James reached across the table and took her hands in his. "What if there was another option?" "There isn't. You don't know my father. When he makes threats, he follows through." "Actually," James said quietly, "there might be something you don't know about me." Amara looked up, confused by the sudden change in his tone. "Those 3 years in Jordan weren't just translation work. I was part of a joint task force investigating international financial crimes, including money laundering through oil companies." He paused, watching her expression change. "I still have contacts in federal law enforcement, people who would be very interested in the methods your father uses to threaten American citizens." The implications of what he was saying slowly dawned on her. "You're saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time your father learned that his reach isn't as long as he thinks it is, especially when it comes to threatening people on American soil." For the first time since receiving her father's call, Amara felt a spark of hope, but it was immediately tempered by fear. "James, if we fight him, there's no going back. He'll never forgive this kind of defiance. I'll truly be cut off forever." James smiled, the expression warm and certain. "Amara, do you remember what Emma asked you that first day? If you don't want to do something, why do you have to do it?" "Of course. So let me ask you now, do you want to go back to Dubai and marry someone your father chooses? Do you want to spend the rest of your life making other people rich while you stay miserable?" "No," she whispered. "Then why do you have to do it?" Before she could answer, they heard small footsteps in the hallway. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed animal and looking confused by the late-night conversation. "Why is everyone awake? And why does Miss Amara look sad?" James and Amara exchanged a look, both realizing that whatever decision they made now would affect not just their own futures, but the future of this remarkable little girl who had brought them together. "Come here, sweetheart," Amara said, opening her arms. Emma climbed onto her lap, and Amara held her close, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. In that moment, holding Emma while James watched them both with infinite tenderness, Amara realized she'd already made her choice. She wasn't going anywhere. 6 months later, Amara stood in a federal courthouse in downtown Chicago, watching her father's business associates being led away in handcuffs. The investigation James had helped initiate had uncovered decades of financial crimes, including the very threats Khalil had made against James's family. Ms. Al-Rashid, FBI agent Sarah Coleman approached her in the courthouse hallway. "Your testimony was crucial in this case. Your father's organization won't be threatening anyone else." Amara nodded, feeling a complex mixture of relief and sadness. She had helped bring down her own father, but in doing so, she had protected countless other people from his ruthless business practices. "What happens to him now?" she asked. "He's facing extradition and multiple charges in several countries. It's likely he'll spend the rest of his life in prison." Despite everything he had done, Khalil was still her father. The grief was real, even if the choice had been necessary. James appeared at her side, taking her hand with the easy familiarity that had developed over months of building a life together. "Ready to go home?" Home. The word still gave her a thrill of happiness. Home was James's small apartment, which they were planning to move out of next month into a larger place with a yard where Emma could play. Home was a life built on love rather than money, on choice rather than obligation. "Miss Amara, Miss Amara," Emma's voice echoed through the courthouse hallway as she ran toward them, her after-school babysitter following behind. "Guess what happened at school today?" "What happened, sweetheart?" Amara knelt down to catch Emma in a fierce hug. "Mrs. Peterson asked us to draw pictures of our families, and I drew you and Daddy and me. And when she asked who you were, I said you were my almost mom who used to be a princess but decided to be our family instead." Amara's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pure joy. Almost Mom was the most beautiful title she'd ever been given. "Actually," James said, his voice carrying an unusual nervousness that made both Amara and Emma look up at him with curiosity, "I was hoping we could make that almost part official." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, dropping to one knee right there in the courthouse hallway. "Amara, 6 months ago you taught me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life. It's about building an entirely new life with someone who makes you want to be better than you ever thought possible." Emma gasped with delight, bouncing on her toes. "Is Daddy asking you to marry us?" "Emma and I have been talking," James continued, his eyes never leaving Amara's face, "and we've decided we don't want to be your almost family anymore. We want to be your real family, forever and always. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Amara looked at these two people who had shown her what unconditional love looked like. A man who worked 3 jobs without complaint and still had energy to read bedtime stories. A little girl who saw the world with kindness and infinite possibility. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." As James slipped the simple, beautiful ring onto her finger, a ring he'd saved for months to buy, Emma threw her arms around both of them. "Now we really are a family," Emma declared with satisfaction. "And Miss Amara, you don't have to be a princess anymore. You can just be our mom." Amara laughed through her tears, holding tight to her new family in the middle of a courthouse hallway. She had lost a fortune and gained everything that mattered. She had walked away from a life of privilege and found a life of purpose. But most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in holding on to what you have. It's in letting go of what's wrong to reach for what's right. 6 months later, on their wedding day, Emma would serve as their flower girl, walking down the aisle in a dress that cost less than Amara's old daily coffee budget, but made her feel like the most important person in the world. And every night, as they tucked Emma into bed in their new house with the yard and the swing set James had built by hand, Amara would remember that the best love stories don't start with once upon a time. They start with a moment when someone sees who you really are and decides you're worth choosing, again and again and again.